During this global pandemic called COVID-19, we Americans face a fundamental choice. Will we turn away from one another, or will we turn outward toward one another? Today, COVID-19, why we need community now. Hi, I'm Rich Harwood. This is another episode of Harwood Half Hour. Good to be with you. I know we tried this yesterday and had to end the session due to technical difficulty, so glad to be back today. Shoot me a message about where you're calling in from today and making sure that you can hear me. Hopefully we won't have more technical difficulties this afternoon. Here's a question I want you to think about as we're going through the next 20 minutes or so together. And it's this: in what ways do you believe we need community during COVID-19? You know, when I was thinking about today, there are all sorts of things, all sorts of topics I feel compelled to talk about in terms of the leadership in our country, our politics, the ways in which we need to mobilize the country to take action against the coronavirus, to flatten the curve, as they say. And I'll get to those topics over the coming weeks. But today, I decided I just want to talk to you. I just want to talk to you about where you are, about how you're feeling about things, and about your relationship, about our relationship to one another and to community. You know, all this is happening as we've been living through a period of polarization, of anger in our politics, about us divvying ourselves up against one another, about dividing up into tribes, about the grievances that so many of us hold today about our lives, about public life, about politics. And it comes at a time when now we are scared about what's happening around us. We are fearful. We're concerned about how is this going to unfold in terms of our public health, in terms of our individual health, our family health, in terms of our economy, in terms of our politics. And it seems to me that this pandemic, amid this polarization, amid this anger, amid this fear, amid this concern, this pandemic is a wake-up call for us. It's a wake-up call about the fact that we can do better, that as Americans we can be better. It's about who are we really becoming and who do we seek to become as a nation, as people, as individuals in our daily lives. And it's about how do we bring out the best in ourselves and the best of us, and to stop bringing out so much of the bad things about us, the worst things in us. I think we face a fundamental choice today about all this. Now, as you know, so much of the language around this pandemic is language around isolation, language about protecting ourselves from one another, language about quarantines. These are all real medical concerns that are at hand, and that we have to listen to the experts and physicians and epidemiologists and others about. We do need to take care of ourselves. We do need social distancing, or what might be better thought of as physical distancing. But here's the thing. The last thing we need right now is to disconnect from one another. The last thing we need right now is to lean away from one another. The last thing we need right now is to turn away from one another. And the last thing we need right now is for each of us to turn our backs on each other. We need to be connected to each other. We need to be attuned to one another. If, in fact, we want to fight this virus and pandemic, and as importantly, if we want to make sure that we move forward together as a country and as a community. Now, to be attuned to one another means that we need to be awake. You know, at our recent annual Harwood Summit, I started the discussion by asking people, what does it mean to awaken? And I think the notion of being awake, of awakening, has more relevance and resonance today than it did some months ago when I introduced it at the summit. And when we talked about it that day in Philadelphia at the National Constitution Center, people talked about the notion of awakening meaning that we are awake, we are alive, we are present, that it means something is stirring within us, that there's something happening within us that is active. It means that we are, as we're taking things in and as we're present and awake, we are resorting things, sorting through things in a way, and generating and finding and creating new meaning about what's around us. And to awaken, to be awake, means that we are in motion. We're not static, we're not stagnant, we're in motion, we're in movement. We're making things happen in our own lives and in the lives of people around us. That's what my recent book, as you know, Stepping Forward, is about. It's about how people have awakened themselves at different times when different challenges have presented themselves to us, both individually and collectively as communities. You know, in wartime, like when Great Britain was being bombed during World War II, people rallied together and helped one another. They stepped forward to ensure that they were connected to one another, attuned to one another, supporting one another. During natural disasters here in the United States, people step forward all the time. It's amazing the capacities, the innate capacities that we have within ourselves and within one another. Just think about how the Nashville community during the recent storms has stepped forward and worked together to restore their sense of community and start to rebuild. Think about after the Houston flooding a year or two ago, how people throughout the greater Houston area and throughout the greater United States, for that matter, came together and with a can-do spirit and made sure that Houston could get back up on its feet and keep going and have the same can-do spirit that Houston has had for so many years now. And I think about Newtown, Connecticut, where I was called in after the massacre there, when the community faced unimaginable tragedy, and how people there stepped forward, victims, families who lost their children, victims in terms of teachers who had to witness what happened, victims in terms of small business owners whose businesses closed, much like so many businesses are closing today. There in the town of Newtown, people stepped forward to support one another, to help one another, to be attuned to one another. At a time when they could have stepped back from one another, they instead chose to step forward toward one another. Here's another opportunity in our country today for us to step forward. Now, no doubt we face a unique medical challenge, a unique public health challenge, and we need to have physical distancing. We need to make sure that those of us who are ill or potentially ill isolate ourselves for a 2-week period. But there are so many things we can still do together to ensure that we're moving forward together. And so I happen to believe that right now we should be asking ourselves this question: how do we use this crisis to change the trajectory of our country? To say that the polarized politics that we've been experiencing, the divvying up among ourselves into tribes and different groups, the grievances that are holding us back, the sense of loneliness that so many people feel in American society and have felt for so long, the sense that so many kids have felt abandoned in our communities. We can use this crisis to get on a better course, to get on a better path, a more hopeful, inclusive path. And so here are 4 things I want you to think about, and I hope that you'll do. I hope that you'll do. To be awakened means that we, as I said, we are in motion. We are doing things. We are not stagnant. We are not static. We are in motion. So here's the first one. I think at a time like this, we need to make this crisis about community. We need to make it about community. Now, as I've said, I know so many of us are hunkered down. So many of us need to be isolated and separated from one another. But there is a difference between isolating ourselves for medical reasons and hunkering down and closing ourselves off. And what we need to do today is to recognize that this virus, this pandemic, is teaching us that we need community now more than ever. We need each other now more than ever. You need others now more than ever, and other people need you now more than ever. We all know we can't stop this virus on our own. It's going to take collective action. All of us working together in ways that look out for one another. There's some responses that absolutely, positively must come from the federal government. And my hope would be that the federal government would move faster and sooner and better during this tragedy. But let's face it, there are many, many, many things that can only come from our local communities and can only come from us. Think about it. Are we going to allow seniors who are now shut in to get further isolated and experience further loneliness during this crisis? Are we going to say to kids who are no longer in school that now you're on your own, that you have to fend for yourself? Are we going to turn away from people who can't leave their homes or can't find a way to get out so that they can get to a grocery store and get food? Or are we going to say to them, well, you're just going to have to wait it out on your own? Are we going to say to people who can't go to the pharmacy to pick up their prescription that they need to stay healthy or to get healthy, are we going to say to them that you're on your own? Are we really going to say that so long as I'm okay, it's okay for you not to be okay? I don't think so. I think we've got to make this about community. It's right now that we need to have a mindset, a disposition, a posture that is turned outward toward one another, where we see and hear one another, where we are attuned to one another, where we care about one another, where everyone's welfare counts. Isn't that in part the definition of dignity? That each life matters as much as our own, that we are all created equal, that we all have an intrinsic value that was given to us at birth, that it is a birthright. If you believe in dignity, if you believe that we need one another, if you believe that we will only be as healthy as if all of us can come along, not just some of us, then we've got to make this about community. That's number one. Number two is this. We have to see ourselves as doers. So much of what's being talked about is that we are victims. And yes, we are victims of a pandemic that is spreading globally and that is out of control at the moment. But will we simply see ourselves as victims, or will we begin to see ourselves as doers, that we have capacity to do something, that we can be producers of public goods and common goods and shared goods together, that we can be collaborators and partners in building a healthier community and making sure we get through this together? And so my question to you is, where is your sphere of influence here? As I said, you can't solve this pandemic on your own. None of us can. You can't even take on all the challenges in your community on your own. None of us can. No single leader, no single organization, no single institution can. No single faith organization can. But here's the thing. While that may be true, what is also true is this. What can you do? Where can you take action? Where can you be a doer, a partner, a collaborator, a builder, a maker, a creator, a co-creator with others in your community? Maybe it begins just with your parents or with your kids, making sure that you're reaching out and you're staying in touch and you're staying attuned. Maybe it means that you're reaching out to your coworkers who are in their homes isolated because of this pandemic, and you make sure that you stay connected. Maybe because you're all working in different places, you come together every morning to talk about not only the work you need to still produce, but about how people are getting along and the support that they need from one another. In different neighborhoods across the country, including my own right here in Bethesda, Maryland, neighborhood associations that are typically putting on block parties and swim parties and bake sales and all sorts of things are now coming together and enlisting people across their neighborhoods and saying, will you call someone during the day who's a shut-in? Will you go to the grocery store for someone who needs food? Will you watch these kids while their parents still go to work or try to get by on something else? Will you go to the pharmacy to pick up a prescription for someone? There are so many things that we can do together that will not only help solve a problem, but here's the other thing about being a doer. At a time like this, when we are so fearful and afraid and concerned about our future, our anxiety can go up, our fear can go up, we can hunker down even more. We can feel a lost sense of control over our future and our ability to shape our future. What I know from our work over the last 30 years is this: the more we are in motion, the more we become doers, the greater sense of agency we feel about ourselves and one another, and the greater sense of control we believe we have and feel we have to shape our future, our individual future and our shared common future. So if number one is let's make this about community, and number two is see yourself as a doer, number three is this: we need to take back our shared narrative. So much of the narrative today in America is about how we're losing this battle. So much of it is about how we're going to be defeated. So much of it is about how many things are going wrong. And yes, there will be too many deaths. There will be far too few hospital beds to take care of people. At the same time, though, we have a choice. We can wallow in this negative narrative that will increase our sense of fear, that will increase our anxiety, that will further make us hunker down and turn away from one another and turn our backs on one another. Or we can tap into the can-do spirit of America, the same damn spirit that helped us found this country hundreds of years ago. When a ragtag group of people came off of farms and small towns and other places against King George and decided to fight against tyranny, they had no army, they had no fax machines, they had no internet, they had no money. At the start, they had no uniforms. But they shared a common purpose, and they began to create a can-do spirit in this country that I believe still lives today in every community across this country. We need to reignite and reclaim and rediscover that can-do spirit, and that happens by us taking back our shared narrative. And here's how we do it. We need to make visible in our communities the good things that people are doing, the positive steps that people are doing. And we need to highlight those stories, illuminate those stories, share those stories with each other. You can do this through Facebook. You can do it through Zoom sessions. You can do it through emails. You can do it through social media. You can do it when you're passing a neighbor on the street while you're still 6 feet away from one another, so you have the right physical distancing. You can still share these can-do spirit stories that tell us that we still have the capacities, the innate capabilities to come together and fight this pandemic and flatten this curve and rebuild our communities and reignite our country, and to do it in a way that makes us better and stronger and healthier and more hopeful than we were than before this pandemic started. That's our opportunity. But to do that, we've got to make visible these stories. We have to tell them to one another, and we have to share them over and over and over again. We can't tell them enough. All you have to do is turn on the news every night. And I know when I do, my heart sinks and my stomach starts to churn and I start to get depressed and I start to get anxious. And I suspect you probably feel the same way. We've got to counter all that negative news, much of which is true, but we still can counter it to suggest that we have the can-do spirit to move forward, because we need that can-do spirit to get up, to get moving, to work together. And so if the first point is to make this about community, and the second one is to see yourself as a doer, and the third point is to take back our shared narrative, the fourth point is this: we have to focus or refocus on what matters to people. It's clear there's a problem here. It's a big problem. It's a huge one. It's going to be with us for a while now. It's not going away. We can't snap our fingers and just hope that it goes away. We can't wave some magic wand. There is no speech some political leader can make that will make things better. we're in a heap of trouble. But we can either have all the negative talk, as I've said, or we can focus on what matters to us right now, which is what are our shared aspirations for the kind of community and the kind of country we want moving forward? What are the ways in which we can begin to articulate what we're for, not just what we're scared of? What we're for, not just what we're afraid of? What we're for, not simply what we're against? For too long, I know you share this view, else you wouldn't be listening to this. For too long, we have spent our time talking about what we're against, who we're against, how we're different from one another. And it's driving us crazy. And it's making us fearful. And it's making a lot of us depressed and feel isolated and alone. And it's taking away any sense of possibility and hope that we need in order to move forward. So I'm urging you, the fourth thing you can do is start to talk to your friends, your neighbors, your co-workers, other folks you find online about your shared aspirations for our community and this country. It's only when we start to speak it out loud that it actually exists and is real. It's only when we name something out loud that it has a life of its own and feels real to us. It's only when we say it out loud that we can share it with one another. It's only when we say it out loud that we can co-own it with each other and then co-create it together and move forward together on it and be doers around it. These are the things we need to do. You know, I was on a Zoom call with 60 people today from all around the country. It was one of the most hopeful calls I've been on since this damn thing started. You could do the same thing with 6 people, 6 friends, 6 co-workers, 6 neighbors, 6 people you don't know, and start to talk about your shared aspirations. You can get on a Zoom call with people you work with across your community and reignite a conversation about your shared aspirations. We can do this. We can do this. And not only can we do it, we need to do it, and we must do it. And so to sum up, we need to make this about community. We need to see ourselves. You need to see yourself as a doer, as a maker, as a creator. We have to collectively and individually take back our shared story and take back and reclaim our can-do spirit. And we need to focus on what really matters to people. As I said, you know, there's a difference between being safe and hunkering down. There's a difference between physical distancing and turning our backs on one another. There is definitely a difference between turning away from one another and turning outward toward one another. We have a fundamental choice in our country right now. And here's the thing, no politician, no foundation president, no nonprofit leader, no faith leader can make this choice for us. You, me, others listening in, it's our turn. It's our turn to step forward. It's our turn to make this choice. It's our turn in making this choice to reclaim our country and to get us on a better trajectory that is more hopeful and inclusive. This pandemic is a mess. It's creating a mess. And unfortunately, and so sadly, so many people are going to needlessly die. We have a choice in the face of this adversity. Will we come together and create something better than what we had before? Or will we simply muddle through this and get through it and revert back to where we were before? A place that none of us liked, a place that didn't create a sense of possibility, a place that didn't create a sense of hope, a place where too many people were lonely, a place where too many kids felt abandoned, a place where too many people were addicted to opioids and meth, a place where too few people in America had a sense of dignity, and where too few people had a real sense and a real shot at the American dream. We can do better, we can be better. Now is our time. So here's my hope for you in closing up. My hope, first and foremost, is that you stay in good health and that you take care of yourself and that you take care of your loved ones and that you're attuned to them and that you're with them and that you care for one another. I also hope, beyond that, that you reach out to others around you, that you think about where your sphere of influence is, even if it's just with one other person. In my faith, Judaism, there's an adage that says, if you save one person, you save the world. As a person of faith, I deeply, deeply, deeply believe that. You just need to touch one person, no more, but no less. And so thanks for joining me today. I know it's tough times, it's adverse times. We'll get through this, and we'll get through it a heck of a lot better if we do it together. And so if this message resonated with you today, if you care about the things that I'm talking about today, then I hope you'll share this with your friends and colleagues and coworkers and others. I hope you'll go to our website, theharwoodinstitute.org, to find resources you can use to help take some of the steps I talked about today. And I hope in the coming days that you will stay well and be well. Thanks for joining me. Look forward to talking to you again soon.